Hello and welcome back to Stories from the Journey. My name is James Lagoski and I'm the author of the Journey Poetry Series. In our first video, I took everyone back to where the journey started at Bill's funeral and the promises I had made that day. Now what I'm going to do is take you to a year after Bill's death, when an event happened with me and my wife that I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about, but by the time it was over, there were two very special things that happened through this event. The first is that Bill found a way to tell me he was all right. It was like he felt he needed to tell me that because for the last year I fell into such a deep depression that the people that knew and loved me were a little concerned about the levels of that depression. I guess, to be honest, I was pretty suicidal myself. And although I had this connection I described in the first video that I found with God, that just didn't seem to register during that time period. So when I say that he found a way to tell me he was all right, the best way to say that is he was trying to tell me, quit doing this to yourself because of what I did. You can't change that. It is what it is. But understand, I'm all right. Another thing that happened during this event was I seemed to have found a guardian angel, or however you want to describe that. This guardian angel became kind of a friend to me, and it all started when I was running around the house doing something. The radio was playing and a song came on by Jim Morrison and the Doors. Many of you know it's called The End. But what happened is when this song started playing, suddenly I started seeing all these strange visions of, I want to say, symbols and numbers, and it was very bizarre. And I could no longer hear nothing but the music itself. I couldn't hear Morrison's voice singing the lyrics. I was hearing other words in my head, and I don't know if I understood. I didn't have a realization of what was going on. I was just riding with it. When the song ended, well, I can't explain what it was that was going through my mind. It was all pretty bizarre to me. But that's when the words started coming to me. There were times I would see things, and the things I would see somehow made sense to me. And if I could say this in the best way I can, almost like you would solve a math problem, I began to decipher these things that I would see, and then I would write down whatever it was that my hand would write. In the first year after that started, it began this, I want to say, expectation. I didn't know what happened, but I knew something changed in me. Something was different. And so I started writing all these poems, not really sure exactly why. I just did. And as time went on, I had this realization that that's where the key was at, to keep my promise to Bill. You see, that's when I decided I should create a book of poetry from these poems I've been writing, and then I'll dedicate that book into Bill's memory. And by doing that, if I create a book in my mind, well, everyone will read it, and I'll keep my promise to Bill. Well, that's how the book thing came, and my desire to want to write a book. I had no idea how to write a book. At the time I decided to even do that, I didn't even really know how to use a typewriter. And so I would scribble all these poems down on scraps of paper and then put them into a file, and then when I'd have some time, I'd go through all these things I'd written on these scraps of paper, and I would handwrite these poems into a notebook I had. And once I filled that first notebook, I felt pretty good about that. I wrote my first book. It was handwritten in a notebook. I didn't have any realization of what it was going to take to turn that actually into a book someone could hold in their hand. But it was a proud moment. And the neat thing is the words just wouldn't stop. I continued to hear things and see things, and there were times that it was almost maddening if I didn't sit down and write down these things that I felt like I needed to. One of the neat things I like to talk about when I talk about these poems is there were times, especially by the time I got to poems in the second and third books, that I actually had no idea what I was writing, because there would be so much emotion behind the moment of writing these words that I would have tears in my eyes. And of course, all of us know that when we have tears in our eyes, it tends to blur our vision. So imagine you're writing on a piece of paper while you've got tears coming out of your eyes. I literally couldn't see what it was my hand was writing. I just wrote. That's the power behind some of the words in these poems. Is I began to feel like, as I've described many times over the years, that, well, I didn't write that poem necessarily for me or someone else. I wrote them poems for us, all of us, including me. Some of those poems have messages that I still am trying to correct about myself. I think what's funny is over the years also I had people that I knew that would say, you know, your poems are really good, but I know you. That's not who you are. And I would have to laugh and say they were right. That those are poems of how I wish I could be, or who I'd like to be. That doesn't necessarily mean that I am, but I'm working on it. In my next video, I will read a few poems and then tell you the stories behind them. I want to thank you all for joining me here on the journey. Not real great about being in front of a camera, but I'll get used to it as time goes on, because I have to. I need to tell this story. Better than that, I love telling this story. I want to thank all of you for simply being you. That just needs to be said more often. I'm glad I could say it to you today. God bless, and best wishes to you all. Thank you for listening.